Front and Center. Front and Center. A focus on important and significant developments affecting the lives of Filipinos, not only in the Philippines, but also those living and working around the world. Join us in Front and Center. Front and Center. Here on Radyo Pilipinas World Service.
Welcome to Front and Center, where we focus on developments in the Philippines, legislation that provides policies and directions that strives to promote a better economy for the country, issues that concern the welfare and well-being of every Filipino. All of these and more will be front and center. You can watch this program on our Facebook page and YouTube channel. That's Radyo Pilipinas World Service. And you can hear this broadcast on our audio streaming through Evox PBS receiver app. Also on our shortwave broadcast through shortwave frequencies. That's 12.020 megahertz, 15.640 megahertz, and 17.665 megahertz. This is your host, Jerome Toledo. Let's begin Front and Center on Radyo Pilipinas World Service.
Front and Center. Front and Center. Here on Radyo Pilipinas World Service.
And in the continuing effort of the government to assist overseas Filipinos affected by the Middle East crisis, particularly in assistance when they come home, a total of 4,608 overseas Filipino workers, or OFWs, have received various types of assistance from the Philippine government amid the escalating regional tension in the Middle East. That's what Migrant Worker Secretary Hans Leocacdac said during the House Committee hearing on Committee on Foreign Affairs. In his presentation at the joint hearing of that said committee and on the impact of the United States, Israel, and Iran conflict on OFWs yesterday, Secretary Cacdac said that DMW and the Overseas Workers Welfare Administration, or OWA, have been on the ground providing various forms of support, including temporary accommodation, financial aid, food and basic necessities, and psychosocial services, both in conflict-affected areas and transit hubs in Hong Kong, Singapore, Malaysia, in the United Kingdom, and Ethiopia. He said the Migrant Workers Department is also coordinating with the Department of Foreign Affairs to help Filipinos in areas without Migrant Workers Office, or MWOs, including those OFWs, or Overseas Filipino Workers, who were traveling as tourists when the tensions escalated. In host countries with designated shelters during emergencies like Bahrain, Israel, and Qatar, Secretary Cacdac said the Philippine officials are coordinating closely with these facilities to ensure the welfare of overseas Filipino workers. He said that the Philippine government also provide backup support, including temporary accommodation, food, water, and financial assistance, particularly for those workers whose employment has been disrupted. So this is a big help that has been mentioned, that Secretary Cacdac mentioned in the House Committee hearing yesterday. And Secretary Cacdac said that at least 380 OFWs have so far requested repatriation from the region. And he assured the government is preparing for 2 chartered flights as directed by President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. to assist those who wish to return home. So I mean to say that's the directive of the president to help those overseas Filipino workers affected by the Middle East crisis to go home safely and sound. And he explained that at this time, the repatriation efforts remain challenging due to limited airspace in several countries in the region. And recently, Iran said that they will not stop from attacking several targets across the region. And also Iran is attacking ships that is passing through the Strait of Hormuz. So, and at the same time, the airspace in some areas in the Middle East is still closed or are affected by the Iranian attacks. So the challenge remains difficult, or there's still challenges in repatriating Filipinos in that region. And for now, Secretary Kakdak said the DMW, OWA, and the DFA assist OFWs and cross them overland. So here's what Secretary Kakdak said, a portion of what he said there during the House Committee on Overseas Workers Affairs.
Thus far, 4,600 ang natulungan natin. It could be the case na yung 4,600 na yan ay one or two or three modes of assistance na nabigay natin. Maaring nadala natin to temporary accommodation, maaring na-repatriate natin, maaring nabigyan ng pagkain. So it need not be one form of assistance lang per person. Next slide would be repatriation. And ito po ang we are braced to repatriate around. Ito, we get the requests and we're braced to repatriate. Those who are ready at this stage would be 380. Medyo mataas din po around yung ating yung pang nangangailangan na ma-repatriate, but of those who need to be repatriated, 380 ang ready at the moment. That's not including those who we are about to charter. The President announced our impending charter flights, and very soon I will be proceeding to the Middle East to finalize yung departures and pagpapaalis na nung charter flights out of that area, the area involved. Yun, malaki-laki po ang bilang na makakabilang dun sa charter flights natin. So at least 2 ang nakahanda po in the coming days. Yung 679 represents a figure na mga natulungan natin. Of the 679, 110 ang nanumbalik na out of the tickets that OWA and DMW have issued. Kasama na dito yung kinikwento ni Yusek Tago na mga naitawid natin through the land border crossing. The reality is, with the closure of the airspace because we're looking at Kuwait, Bahrain, Qatar, UAE, and Israel, 5, the reality is 4 of those 5 countries, except for the UAE, ay hindi regular ang flights. And even for the UAE, isa lang ang lumilipad, which is yung kanilang airline, EK, and then I think Etihad is also bracing to fly once again. So it's very limited. So what we do is cross them over land. All the border crossings are identified per each of the 5 countries, and we have teams that will bring them to the border and teams that will receive them on the other side. So naka-pre-position na po yung ating teams that surround these countries where posibleng ma-receive from the other side.
And that was Migrant Worker Secretary Hans Leo Kakdak. And for the OWA side, or the Overseas Workers Welfare Administration side, Administrator Patricia Yvonne Kaunan said the rapid response teams were deployed to critical areas in the Middle East as early as March 2, adding the government has already released funds from the Emergency Repatriation Fund. And Administrator Kaunan said the OWA is expanding its Hotline 1348 operations, and the government's e-report platform is currently being used to process requests for assistance in repatriation. And she said the ERF, or the e-report platform under the General Appropriations Act, is at 1.2 billion Philippine pesos, with nearly 20% utilized as operations continue. And as you heard earlier when we played the video of a portion of Secretary Hans Leo Kakdak's presence there at the House Committee on Overseas Workers Affairs, regarding the expected arrive or departure of the migrant worker secretary to Middle East, and because of that, President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. Directed the secretary of migrant workers Hansler Kakdak to travel to Dubai, United Arab Emirates, to assess the situation there on the ground and oversee the repatriation of Filipinos who wish to return to the Philippines. That's amid the ongoing conflict or tensions there in the Middle East. And the president said ferrying Filipinos is now easier. That's according to the president. It's now easier following the opening of land border crossings with the UAE and Israel. So with this, the land travel is possible, but the airspace there is not yet safe because, as I mentioned earlier, the air attacks or airstrikes conducted by Iranian military is still ongoing in the particular in the Middle East, particularly in some Arab states like United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, Qatar, and even Saudi Arabia and Lebanon as well, and as well as Jordan. And the president noted that two flights for repatriation are being planned, including one from Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, and another one from Fujairah town in the United Arab Emirates. And the government must rely on local authorities in the Middle East to protect and repatriate Filipinos. And the president noted that OFWs are receiving assistance in foreign countries because of their good job performance. So the government is doing everything they can to repatriate and bring back those Filipinos affected by the Middle East conflict. So the government is very eager to repatriate those Filipinos back here in the country. So they will do everything they can to bring our Filipinos back here safe and sound. And also, on the issues still affecting the Filipino workers or overseas Filipino workers, and in line with the directive of President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. to ensure the safety and welfare of overseas Filipino workers affected by the geopolitical crisis in the Middle East, the Department of Social Welfare and Development, or DSWD, has committed to provide immediate prevention or intervention rather and assistance to the returning OFWs. The Social Welfare Development spokesperson, Assistant Secretary Irene Dumlao, said several OFWs have already arrived in the country and received the necessary assistance from the DSWD in coordination with the Department of Migrant Workers, or DMW, as well as the Overseas Workers Welfare Administration, or OWA, and other concerned government agencies. So they did not mention it, but those agencies actively working side by side with DMW and OWA are the Department of Foreign Affairs, the Labor Department, and also the Technical Education Skills Development Authority, or TESDA. So those agencies are working hand in hand with DMW and OWA. And the DSWD spokesperson, ASEC Irene Dumlao, said psychosocial intervention is among the key services that they will extend to returning OFWs, especially since ongoing conflict in the Middle East is expected to have an emotional and psychological impact on them. And we are showing you right now the some of the snapshots of the scenes when those repatriated Filipinos have arrived in here in Manila, in the Philippines, particularly in the Ninoy Aquino International Airport. And upon arrival at the airport, the OFWs will be assessed by social workers to determine the appropriate psychosocial support and other forms of aid that they may be needing. And the DSWD conducts stress debriefing sessions, counseling, and interviews to address the emotional and psychological needs of the returning workers and to assess whether they require additional medical support. It also coordinates with the Department of Health to ensure that OFWs who need further medical attention receive the necessary assistance. So it's not just the Labor Department, the Foreign Affairs, and Tesla is actively helping in this situation, but also the Health Department, as well as the DSWD itself. And the department also offers a temporary shelter, that we're talking about the social welfare and development. They offer temporary shelter to repatriated OFWs who may require a place to stay while arranging their travel back to their home provinces. And these temporary shelters are provided through the DSWD centers and residential care facilities, which is subject to availability. And we hope the shelters will be available for all repatriated Filipinos there, and it will not be subjected to availability. And at present, no repatriated OFWs are currently staying in those facilities, rather, or other temporary shelters. And aside from psychosocial support and temporary shelter, the DSWD will also extend its financial aid through its assistance to individuals in crisis situation program. And the OFWs can receive transportation assistance in going back to their respective provinces. And the DSWD official noted that one of the primary concerns of those returnees is securing a source of livelihood once they return to the country. And to address that concern, the department extends its support through the Sustainable Livelihood Program. So that's the Sustainable Livelihood Program, or SLP, that they are offering to those repatriated Filipinos that is being affected by the Middle East situation there, and when they come back, they will be assisted by the DSWD. And under the employment facilitation track of the SLP, beneficiaries receive training aligned with their chosen job or skill, as well as assistance in processing pre-employment documents and other administrative requirements. Meanwhile, under the micro enterprise development track, which is still falls under the DSWD, beneficiaries undergo capacity building training to enhance their competencies and may receive seed capital or starting capital to start small businesses. And Assistant Secretary Dumlao said close to 300 repatriated OFWs have already received assistance from the DSWD and other government agencies. So not just the starting capital that those repatriated OFWs that they may receive, but also other forms of assistance will be extended as well to those Filipinos who have returned to this country, because as mentioned, we have 300 repatriated OFWs from across Arab states have returned here in the country. So the DSWD will help them, and that's in conjunction with other assistance that is being offered by the Migrant Workers Department, as well as the OWA, or the Overseas Workers Welfare Administration, if they are member of that said agency, which is OWA. And also still focusing on developments or the issues affecting affecting the Philippines, particularly in the economy. President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. urged local chief executives nationwide to use their local government support fund, or LGSF, to ease the burden on vulnerable sectors affected by escalating tensions in the Middle East. So the Middle East conflict is not only a global issue, but also already affecting now the local economy, and the local economy of the Philippines. And the president issued the call as part of the national government's proactive efforts to cushion the possible economic and social impact of the crisis, particularly on families of overseas Filipino workers, or OFWs. Which is under the instruction, local government units, or LGUs, may use those fund or that particular fund to assist communities affected by international crisis, including families of OFWs impacted by the Middle East conflict, as well as through financial aid, social services, and emergency response program. And that local government support fund is a national government fund transferred to provinces, cities, municipalities, and barangays to finance priority development or development programs and urgent local needs. And for this year's national budget, that fund allocation was about 57.88 or almost 58 billion pesos to support projects and programs of LGUs nationwide. So the LGS fund allocation, 57.88 billion pesos will be is allocated to all provinces across here in the Philippines. So they will be all of the provinces will get the share of that particular fund. And that fund provides financial assistance and flexibility, enabling local governments to implement programs that address local economic and social concerns. While that fund or LGSF is usually used for development projects here in the Philippines, LGUs may opt to redirect or prioritize programs to help OFWs and their families affected by overseas conflicts. So the LGUs now have the power to use that fund in order to assist our repatriated Filipinos to facilitate programs that will cater and will help those in need. And among the possible assistance programs are emergency financial aid for returning OFWs, financial support for families whose income was disrupted, and subsidies for displaced workers. And Metro Manila mayors, including Manila City Mayor Francisco Isko Moreno Domagoso and San Juan City Mayor Francis Zamora, joined Transportation Secretary Giovanni Lopez and Social Welfare Secretary Rex Gatchalian in a press conference in Malacanang yesterday, Wednesday, March 11, to discuss the government's preparation. And Moreno thanked the president for increasing the LGSF allocation, saying the move will help local governments respond quickly to the needs of affected families. And Metro Manila mayors earlier met with Executive Secretary Ralph Recto to discuss the president's directive and prepare for the possible impact of the Middle East crisis on the transport sector and other local services. And also, since we're talking about the local side or the local economy, that is being affected by the Middle East crisis, the Quezon City government has created a dedicated task force to strengthen assistance for its residents who are overseas Filipino workers in the Middle East regions that are affected by the escalating conflict. In a news release that was released by Wednesday, or yesterday rather, March 11, the city government said through Executive Order number 5, series of 2026, its Mayor Joy Belmonte established that task force, which is AGAP QC OFW, or the Assistance, Guidance, and Advocacy and Protection of Q Citizens Overseas Filipino Workers. So Belmonte, or Mayor Belmonte, said that task force would lead the city's coordinated efforts and response to migrant workers in the Middle East and their families back home. And she said that the city government is closely coordinating with national government agencies to ensure that OFWs who are residents of that said city, Quezon City, will receive the assistance and protection they need. And she urged her constituents living abroad to remain vigilant and prioritize their safety as the situation continues to unfold. And she assures that her citizens in the Middle East are not alone during this time of crisis. And Mayor Belmonte said the initiatives aims to ensure that OFWs from or residing or has address in Quezon City receive immediate assistance and protection as tensions in the region continue to affect Filipino workers abroad. And she said the QC Public Employment Services, or Service Office rather, is now in close coordination with with the national counterpart, which is the Department of Migrant Workers, in the monitoring of developments, facilitating possible repatriation, and delivering support to affected workers. And that task force is also mandated to provide a range of services for affected workers and their families, including crisis response, psychosocial support, job matching, skills retooling, livelihood assistance, and access to overseas employment opportunities in non-conflict areas. So, aside from the assistance that the Department of Social Welfare and Development is actively offering or extending to repatriated citizens, but also the local government has a separate programs to assist our repatriated Filipinos in the Middle East. So this is a whole of government approach that we are seeing here. And also, the city government is also preparing other forms of support for OFWs whose deployment was affected due to flight cancellations and restricted airspace. And according to the data that was presented by the QC or the Quezon City government, it showed that there are around 1,400 residents who are currently living and working in Middle Eastern countries, including Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, Kuwait, Qatar, Bahrain, Oman, Israel, Lebanon, and Jordan. And OFWs and their families seeking help may coordinate with its Migrant Resource Center, and also which is under the Quezon City PESO, or its Public Employment Service Office, which serves as the city's one-stop help desk, providing information services, case assistance, psychosocial support, and referrals to government programs. And Mayor Belmonte urged its citizens to follow advisories from Philippine embassies and concerned government agencies and their host countries to keep themselves safe. So that's part of the government's effort to assist our overseas Filipino workers. And also, when we come back, we will talk about, still in the Middle East crisis situation. It's still part of the ongoing coverage. We will tackle about the energy aspect of the Middle East crisis. So what is the government is taking right now to address the situation that is currently affecting our energy supply and also the energy sector itself. So when we come back, we will discuss that particular aspect when Front and Center returns here on Radyo Pilipinas World Service.
Paano nga ba mag-register para magkaroon ng schedule sa Bagong Pilipinas Presidential Action Center? Narito ang mga dapat gawin. Gamit ang iyong mobile device, pumunta sa eGov.ph app. Pwede itong i-download mula sa Apple App Store o sa Google Play Store. Gumawa ng account. Ilagay ang email address, valid mobile number, pagkatapos ay makakatanggap ka ng one-time code sa iyong email. Gamitin ang code sa eGov app para sa verification ng iyong account at ng mga impormasyong ibinigay. Congratulations! Meron ka ng eGov.ph app account. Pwede mo na ma-access ang iba't ibang serbisyo ng gobyerno, kabilang ang mga serbisyo sa Bagong Pilipinas Presidential Action Center.
Mabilis ang trivia, dagdag talino. Heto na ang Dagling Kaalaman.
Alam mo ba, ang tamang charging habits ay nakatutulong para mas humaba ang buhay ng iyong cellphone battery. Iwasan ang palaging 0% bago mag-charge. Mas mabuti kung nasa 20% hanggang 80% lang ang isang cycle. Huwag ding iwanang nakasaksak magdamag dahil kahit may auto cut-off, unti-unti ring naaapektuhan ang battery health. At kung kaya, gumamit ng original or certified chargers para mas ligtas at mas matagal ang performance ng iyong phone. Para laging game-ready ang gadget, charge smart, not hard.
Kaunting kaalaman na malaking dagdag talino. Abangan muli ang susunod na Dagling Kaalaman.
Front and Center. Front and Center. Here on Radyo Pilipinas World Service.
Welcome back to Front and Center here on Radyo Pilipinas World Service, still with me, Jerome Toledo. And let's talk about the energy aspect of the Middle East crisis that is currently affecting our energy sector and also the energy mix of the country, and also the oil supply of the Philippines, because Senator Sherwin Gatchalian said that the government needs to accelerate the country's adoption of electric vehicles, or EVs, to mitigate the impact of higher oil prices amid the escalating armed conflict in the Middle East. Senator Gatchalian said in a statement that the ongoing hostilities in the Middle East should serve as a wake-up call. The country needs to reduce its vulnerability to oil price volatility. So that's what Senator Gatchalian said. And accelerating our transition to the adoption of EVs would help insulate the local economy from fuel shocks. So that's what he said, noting that the Philippines imports about 96 to 99% of its oil requirements. So that's a large number of oil supply that we are importing from the Middle East countries. And Senator Gatchalian said the government needs to accelerate the establishment of the necessary infrastructure support, such as charging stations, to encourage more organizations and individuals to adopt EVs. Under the comprehensive roadmap for the electric vehicle industry, or CREVI, the government has a conservative target for the country to have 7,300 vehicle charging stations by 2028, compared with a more ambitious goal of 66,500 charging stations. And CREVI was adopted following the May 2022 enactment of the Electric Vehicle Industry Development Act, or EVIDA, to support EV adoption nationwide. Meanwhile, Senator Gatchalian is sounding the alarm on the potential global fuel crisis and emphasizing the need for the Philippine government to be proactive rather than reactive. Here's what he said.
Again, if you ask me, parang nasa international crisis na nga tayo. This is a different among the many conflicts that we've seen. The difference with this, there's a supply issue because of that tension in the Strait of Hormuz. And I was watching the news last night. Until now, they cannot ship out oil from that area. Of course, we don't want to wait for the crisis to happen. What we want is to prepare for that crisis. No? So one of the ways that we are preparing is to look for funds that the president can have access to, so that he can use those funds to help our drivers, help our fisher folks immediately.
Senator Win Gatchalian. And amid rising fuel prices caused by the Middle East conflict, President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. and the Department of Energy, or DOE, are pursuing a multi-pronged strategy to stabilize costs. So one of them is to diversify oil sources, because President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. announced that the Philippines is negotiating with non-traditional oil supplying countries. Currently, the Philippines is highly vulnerable to regional instability, as 98% of its crude oil imports come from the Middle East. And also, the president also mentioned that our oil supply will last for a month or two. So there's still a lot of oil supply here in the country, but the country is expecting a fresh supply of oil in the next coming weeks. And also, one of the strategies is the emergency powers and tax suspension, because the president is seeking emergency powers from the legislature, which is the House of Representatives, and by constitution, or by law, the Congress will be the only branch of government that will address or tackle the issues regarding with taxation. And the trigger for that will be for the emergency powers to kick in if the oil prices average over $80 per barrel for 1 month. So we are talking about the Dubai crude that will reach over $80, so that will trigger emergency powers and tax suspension. And the government will have the authority to suspend the excise tax on fuel to provide immediate relief to consumers. And lastly, the strategies that the government will implement is the biofuel importation, because the Department of Energy is pushing to amend the Biofuels Act of 2006 to allow for cheaper imports. And the Energy Secretary Sharon Garin noted that local biofuel costs 75 pesos per liter, while imported biofuel is only 37 pesos per liter. And since we're talking about the emergency powers that President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. is asking to Congress, the House of Representatives on Wednesday afternoon approved on second reading a measure that would authorize President Marcos Jr. to temporarily suspend or reduce the excise tax on fuel when extraordinary conditions trigger sharp price shocks that hit transport, food, and household expenses. And one of the authors of the measure, House Majority Leader and Ilocos Norte Representative Ferdinand Sandro Marcos, along with Speaker Faustino Boji D. III, said the bill is built for moments when global disruptions push fuel prices upward fast, and Filipino families need the government to respond with speed and precision. And that measure under House Bill 8418 seeks to amend Sections 148 of the National Internal Revenue Code to allow the President to suspend or reduce fuel excise taxes, which is subject to strict conditions and time limits, so relief can be activated without waiting months for a new law in the middle of a crisis. And Marcos and D pushed for the measure as part of the House effort to keep government prepared for price spikes tied to international events, including conflict-driven disruptions in global oil supply that can ripple into higher domestic pump prices and higher costs of basic commodities. And during plenary deliberations, Marikina Representative Miro Kimbo, chair of the House Committee on Ways and Means, defended the measure on the floor, stressing that the authority is not open-ended and is surrounded by safeguards meant to protect both consumers and fiscal stability. And the first trigger is when the Dubai crude oil price, based on the mean of Platts Singapore, reaches or exceeds $80 per barrel for 1 month immediately before the order to suspend or reduce is issued. The second trigger for that is when there is a declared state of national emergency or calamity that results in extraordinary increases in domestic pump prices as certified by the Secretary of Energy. And the President's suspension or reduction may be applied to specific petroleum products and may be calibrated as a full suspension or partial reduction depending on the conditions that cause the price surge and the scope of relief needed. And also under the bill, it requires that the suspension or reduction be lifted once the extraordinary conditions no longer exist. And to ensure transparency, the bill requires the President, through Secretary of Finance, to report to both chambers within 15 days from issuance of the order and every month thereafter, stating the factual basis for the action, the estimated foregone revenues, and the expected effects on inflation, fuel prices, and other economic activity. And the House moved the bill with urgency as part of the chamber's push under House Speaker D's leadership to keep policy tools ready for a real-world shocks that families feel quickly at the pump, in the market, and in their daily commute. And also, since it's on the second reading, we are expecting the bill to reach on its third and final reading before it reaches Senate for a separate deliberation. And we expect that the bill will be passed swiftly as the situation on the oil supply here in the country continues. And also in the related news, the Department of Energy plans to meet with industry stakeholders as the escalating Middle East conflict drives global oil prices higher. And because of that, the gasoline prices rose about 13% within 3 days, particularly due to the closure of the Strait of Hormuz, key oil shipping route. And the higher oil prices threaten electricity supply in the Philippines' off-grid island communities, which rely heavily on diesel-powered plants. And since the country imports most of its diesel, the prolonged conflict could lead to fuel shortages, depletion of subsidy funds, and possible rotating brownouts, similar to those experienced during the 2022 Ukraine-Russia crisis. And the country currently has about 60 days of petroleum supply as a buffer. And expanding renewable energy in off-grid areas is seen as a long-term solution to strengthen energy security and prevent future power disruption. And we hope, since we mentioned that there is an upcoming oil supply that will be delivered here in the Philippines, that will add or will complement with the oil supply that we have, so that the oil prices here in the Philippines will go stable and will not and the oil prices will not spike even further. So this as the economist says, or analysts are saying, this is a wait and see development. So we will have to wait and see what's next, because the tension in the Middle East is continuously happening by the minute. So we will have to check on the developments here in the Philippines and abroad. And with that, we now conclude this edition of Front and Center on Radyo Pilipinas World Service. Together with our technical team headed by Mr. Milo Junela, on Wirecast we have Justino Cias, and audio streaming Mr. Hiro Locero. This is your host, Jerome Toledo. Until next time, mabuhay.
You have just heard and watched Front and Center. Front and Center. Join us again for another edition here on Radyo Pilipinas World Service. Front and Center.